People are rolling in. Okay, that's right. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to get settled and come on in. All right, Spencer, let's get going. My name is Robin Mermelstein. I'm going to talk not much at all. I just wanted to welcome you all on behalf of Concierge Pediatrics. We invite this group to meet our good friend, Spenser Lipton, who's been supporting our members with helping them educate their families and their children about sleep. So Spencer, I will let you take it away. For the group that's here listening, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or ask as throughout the presentation. I know we just want this to be a very interactive session.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you, Concierge, for having me. As Robin said, I am Spencer. I'm a sleep consultant. I just wanted to share the agenda of what we'll be talking through tonight. It will be lots of information on sleep. So this is also being recorded, so you don't have to take notes. This will be sent to you after because you'll be getting the full one-on-one on all things baby sleep. So I'm Spencer. Like I said, I'm a certified pediatric sleep consultant. I was obsessed with sleep training when my babies were born. I had no concept of it before, but was just thrown into it when my babies ultimately didn't sleep. And I became registered as a sleep consultant in summer of 2023. And since then have been helping families with their babies as young as 10 weeks all the way up to age 5 with issues they have around sleep. My business is called My Sleep Friend, and the reason that I named it that was because everyone really truly needs a friend to go through this process with. Because as you all know, parenthood can be very challenging, especially when you're sleep deprived. So you can call me my sleep friend. So, what is sleep training and how do you do it? Before we jump in, as Robin actually mentions, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add that there. I will do my best to answer as we go. For those of you who added questions before we started, I've worked that in as well. So please just let me know if there's anything else that I've missed that you want me to touch on, and I will do my best. So what is sleep training? Sleep training is the practice and the skills of teaching independent sleep. So, a lot of people think that sleep training means just straight cry it out. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what it is. And then there's also, of course, the misconception that sleep training is not applicable for babies unless they're a certain age, a certain weight. That's also a common misconception. There's a lot of negativity around the term sleep training. And, I've gone back and forth many times on if I want to use a different term when I talk about it. But truly, there's nothing wrong with sleep training because there have been no findings that sleep training can be traumatic or provide any issues with children's development. A lot of the issues that I hear people are concerned about are not being able to form secure attachment, and there are no findings on that whatsoever. I'll tell you from firsthand with my own kids, they have no developmental issues. I sleep train them both, one at 8 weeks and one at 4 months. So I'm not only teaching it, but I've put it into practice myself. So, just to touch on a few sleep training methods that I am well versed in, and then also to give you some of my true thoughts about it. So, we'll start with what I like to say is the most accelerated and what you probably think sleep training is. And that is the term cry it out, or properly called extinction. So, that is the practice of putting your baby down and leaving and not coming back until morning. So, that is what people think of as sleep training. There's many other options out there. There's also the Ferber method and the method check and console, which is actually what I practice with my clients when we work together. The way this works, there's a lot of nuances, and we can totally get into it in more detail if you want, but just to give you a little overview, the way it works is it's based on a timer. Baby goes down fully awake. If they're crying, we set a timer. We're really tuning into what baby's doing to see if they're making any progress in their attempts to self-soothe. And self-soothing could look like a lot of different things. So it could be, finding their hand. It could be sometimes they rub their cheek or their ear. It's also just the ability to not cry when they're trying to do something difficult. So if we see those things happening, we stop the timer and reset it. And we're only going for a check-in if there's 10 or 15 minutes of consistent crying. And the check-in's super brief. We're not being very stimulating. We're not picking them up. We're not rocking them. We're still teaching them to fall asleep on their own, but we have that opportunity to go in and check on them and remind ourselves that we're okay. We also remind our babies, mom and or dad always come back. So that's my favorite method because it's really efficient, but it also has that check-in for parents so they feel more comfortable going into the process because it can be tough. And I always tell people, if it weren't tough, I wouldn't have a job. So it's okay that it feels hard, but it's also okay to do hard things. So just to touch on some other methods that I'm familiar with, but I don't often do, and I'll tell you why. There's the chair method, which is the practice of moving yourself farther out of the room. So you start next to the crib, you move to the middle of the room after a couple nights, you move to the door after a couple nights, you move to the hallway. So that's really just moving your presence out of the room. It takes a very long time. And that's the reason that I don't do what are these more gradual methods are because when people come to me, they want to see results because they are tired and they want their baby to be sleeping and ultimately they want to be sleeping better too. So that's why I feel more comfortable doing check-in console so that my clients can truly see results in a reasonable amount of time. There's also methods like shush pat, where you're patting your baby, on their chest or their tush and shushing them. So you're providing that physical and verbal comfort, and you're still leaving before they fall asleep, but you're, consoling them till they're calm. Again, it takes a lot of time, and you ultimately end up pivoting to a method like check and console, but there's always that option too. Then there's a method called just sit. This is the method that's the most gentle. And really, what you're doing is you're holding your baby and you're just sitting. You're not offering any verbal cues or comforts, like saying, shh, you're not doing any of that. You're not rocking, you're not bouncing, you're not feeding, you're just sitting. And the reason, again, that I also like to do check and console, like I said, it's the most efficient. All sleep training truly does involve crying, even if you're doing that most gentle method, just sit. And the reason for that is because your baby was used to something else prior. And when they're not getting that thing they're used to, then it's normal and it makes sense for them to cry because they're protesting that new thing. So if someone ever tells you that they have a no crying sleep training method, don't listen to them. It's not true in my experience. Babies cry. It's normal, but that's only because that's the only way they know how to communicate that they want something different. And it's okay to want something different. I use the analogy a lot, and maybe if you guys have babies, you don't know this yet, but if you've older kids, if your kid has a hard time separating when you drop them off at school, you drop them off, they cry. You're not going to sit in the classroom all day just because they're crying. You're going to leave them at school because you know that's the best thing for them and they will get used to it. The same principle applies with sleep. You know that they need sleep. So if you're going to let them be in their crib by themselves and teach themselves to put themselves to sleep, but they're crying, that's still okay. You're still a loving, caring, present parent. You're just present outside of the room instead of in the room. So just to touch on a couple of my top tips that I really live by for baby sleep. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my agenda, just make sure that I touch everything that you guys want to know. So the first thing that I always say when people ask me what my top sleep tip is give your baby space. We're so quick to jump to attend to every cry. Babies cry, like I said, they sometimes they're not even doing it intentionally. It's just something they even do in their sleep. So give them a little bit of time to see what they do, and they might settle on their own. They very often will. Another tip is follow, eat, play, sleep. So that really helps one to break any eat to sleep association. And we will touch on sleep associations in a bit, but the biggest one and the one that's hardest to break is the feed to sleep association. So by following that, You don't have a feed to sleep association. You're also naturally giving your baby a chance to digest. And of course, that could look like many different things depending on how old your baby is. A 2 month old isn't awake for very long. There isn't that much opportunity for play, but it's still following that eat, play, sleep. So they're not eating and then sleeping right away. My next tip is to put your baby down 5 to 10 minutes before their wake window ends. And we'll touch on wake windows and what those mean and how we use them. But a lot of what we do with our baby schedules is preventing them from becoming overtired because when you have an overtired baby, it's so much harder for them to fall asleep. So by putting them down before they're too tired, you give them a chance to try and fall asleep on their own without them becoming overtired. So it makes a huge difference. It's one of my little tricks that I share with all my clients, and I promise it makes a huge difference. Another one is that sleepy cues are not reliable. So you might hear a lot about this where babies' eyebrows get red, or they tug on their ears, yawning. I don't know about you, but I yawn all day long, and that doesn't mean I'm ready for bed. So it's really just not reliable in terms of like knowing when to put your baby to sleep. So following wake windows, that is the best. And my last, and one of some, actually three of you asked this question, what is something you could do from day one? And this is it. Start a bedtime and nap time routine. So for nap time, it could be 2 minutes. For bedtime, 20 to 40 minutes, depending on what works well for your family and your baby. But having this routine that you do every time before sleep comes is so helpful because it cues your baby that it's time for sleep. And consistency and routines are really what they thrive on. So adding that in is one of my number one tips. And you can do it from day one. It might feel silly to read a book to a newborn, but I promise it really does help. So,
Spencer, there's a question in the chat. How
sure.
long should the soothing happen? So if they're crying and find their hand for 5 seconds, is that enough to start over?
Yes, it is. That's a great question. It is. So basically, if there is any pause that's like 5 seconds, that feels like a true pause. When I work with my clients one-on-one, I'm constantly getting videos of what they're doing on the monitor. And parents, it's hard. It's a little bit nuanced of what constitutes a pause. I would say like like a second of them just like catching their breath, maybe not a pause. But if looks like they're really trying, then yes, that's a pause. What I also really like about a method like this is, like I said, we're really tuning into what our baby's doing, and we really get to know what their cries mean and what their attempts at self-soothing are. So we're very much not ignoring them. We're really watching what they're doing. I think that's our only open question, so I will move on to the next part, but feel free to keep adding those in. Okay, scheduling. So you'll see there's this little chart here, and we will email that out to everyone after. It's really handy. It's something that's amazing. I made this for my clients and I use it for all of my sample schedules. Like I said, wake windows are really important for babies, really through the ages of 0 to 6 months. What a wake window is the appropriate amount of time for a baby to be awake at any given time before they need to sleep again. So I would love to go through sample schedules for babies 0 to 1, but that wouldn't be a good use of our time. So you'll have this to reference, and you could always reach out to me for sample schedules. But like I said, wake windows are really important when they're young because we don't want them to get overtired. So I suggest going by wake windows as opposed to by the clock up until 6 months or around when they drop to 2 naps. Once they do that, we can go by the clock, and then your schedule becomes way more consistent and reliable. Even when you're on wake windows and you've started sleep training, you start to see that consistency, but wake windows are way more important until you get to that 6 month, 2 mark, 2 month, 2 nap mark. Age appropriate wake windows and nap schedules. Like I said, there's a lot of options here. I will give you a little bit of a guide for how we drop naps. That was one of the questions we received before. Nap transitions are a big topic. We could go on and do a whole webinar just on that. But I would say, just as a little bit of a guide, up to 6 to 8 weeks, I see babies taking 5+ naps. When they drop to 4 is around 2 to 3 months. When they drop from 4 to 3, around 3 to 4 months. 3 to 2 naps, 6 to 7 months, 2 to 1 naps, 14 to 15 months, and dropping the nap completely can happen anytime between 3 and 4. I have known some children who do that prior, but it's not ideal until after 3. It's really more age appropriate, somewhere between 3 and 4. Anyone want to add a question before I move on? Okay. Sleep association. So I know I mentioned this before, and this is one of my favorite topics because I really do think the positives are so helpful and the negatives can be really harmful to independent sleep. And so a lot of parents don't know what constitutes a positive and a negative. So, like I said, the first positive is routines. A really solid bedtime routine before they go to sleep is so helpful. And that could be as simple as feeding, which is should always be at the beginning of the routine to not have that feed to sleep association. Bath, if it's a bath night. If not, I just suggest you can wipe their face down with warm water when they're like a warm washcloth when they're younger. Just again, so you keep that consistent routine and like this, the senses are very like stimulated in the same way each night. So bath or a warm washcloth, lotion, diaper, pajamas. Then you can do a book or two, a song, which is a really nice addition because it's really calming and also very, very obvious that the next thing is sleep. You put your baby down fully awake, and then you say, "Good night, sweet dreams, I love you," turn on the white noise, and leave. And that brings us to the next positive sleep association, white noise. And I know there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, noise out there about is white noise harmful? And if it's at a appropriate volume, then yes, it is. So keeping the white noise machine not too close to them, not too loud, it's a very helpful cue again that sleep is happening, but also it drowns out the outside noise. So we will touch on this in a bit, but one of the questions I loved that you guys asked before is how to handle sleep when you're trying to sleep train a baby and you have a toddler next door with a wall just between them. White noise is the answer. You put a white noise machine in each of their rooms, put one in the hallway. As long as your toddler is a solid sleeper, you're good. So no issues there. I have my kids in the same room and they rarely wake each other up overnight. So white noise is the way to go. The last one that I want to touch on is darkness. So again, I know there's a lot of like controversy when it comes to blackout shades and if it will spoil your baby. My opinion on that is no. Babies are very easily distracted and short naps, which we will get to, are like the worst with young babies. It's super normal, but we want to prevent that. So putting them in a dark space where they're not distracted is really, really helpful. Shows them darkness equals sleep. So getting them to sleep in a dark room, it's great. It doesn't mean that, someday you can take those down or let a little light shine in. That will be fine. But while they're getting used to sleep, blackout shades are great. Okay, negative sleep associations. This is the part that I actually really like to talk about. So, of course, obvious ones, rocking to sleep, bouncing to sleep, really just putting your baby down to sleep and however you get there, that's a negative sleep association. The reason that we call it that is because if your baby is being rocked or bounced to sleep, when they wake up 30 to 45 minutes later, they're going to be expecting that same motion. So if they didn't fall asleep flat on their back in their crib alone, they want whatever was helping them to sleep. So that's why rocking and bouncing is a negative sleep association. Feeding is also, and like I said, that's the hardest one I think to break. It's very common. You're not doing anything wrong if your baby is a few weeks old and you're feeding to sleep. I did that with both of my kids. I have no issues with that. But when you're ready to start working on independent sleep, work on eat, play, sleep, bringing your feeding to the beginning of the routine so you don't have any issues with your baby falling asleep. Of course, it stops them from learning to fall asleep on their own, but it also makes it harder for them to digest. You have to hold them upright. It also makes it harder for them to get full feeds because they're falling asleep while they're eating. And of course, we want our babies to be getting full feeds because if not, they're going to wake up soon because they're hungry. The last one, and another question that I got was about the pacifier. So, if a baby is not able to replace their pacifier, my personal feeling as a sleep consultant is I remove the pacifier from sleep until they can replace it on their own. So every baby's different. I've worked with babies that are 5 months old that can replace it. I've worked with babies that are 7 months old that can't yet. And that's when I say replace it, it means they can easily find it and put it back in their mouth. So doing a passy sprinkle in the crib is fine, 12 passies in the crib. I don't care. If they can find it, great. If they can't and it's falling out right after they sleep, it's no good for me. The reason that I say that again is because if they're falling asleep with it, they're going to expect that same soothing sucking sensation when they're looking to go back to sleep again. And if they can't replace it on their own, it's going to wake them up. So remove the pacifier for sleep training unless your baby can reliably put it back in their mouth. Okay, no more open questions, so I will move along. Okay, troubleshooting. So this is probably the topic that most people are interested in because it's what all the things that can go wrong with sleep. And of course, there are many because our babies aren't robots, which is normal. That's okay. Even the best sleep trained baby is not going to always sleep perfectly. Like, I don't sleep perfectly every night. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I have a harder time falling back asleep. Our babies are the same. So we have to, one, be comfortable knowing that they're not always going to sleep perfectly. But what's also really helpful is having a plan in place for when they don't sleep perfectly. So let's talk about the number one issue that I hear with babies, I would say ages like 2 to 6 months, maybe even like 8 or 9 months, is short naps. So short naps come from the 4 month sleep regression, which can happen actually somewhere between 2 and 4 months, I find. What is happening is your baby is having a permanent change to their sleep cycle. So they're going to start sleeping the same way that adults do. And that is in 30 to 45-minute cycles. So if you have a young baby, you have experienced they were sleeping these long stretches. They could go to sleep, be put down to sleep. They're fine. All of a sudden, they're 3.5 months and they're waking up 30 minutes in, and you're like, what happened? That is the 4 month sleep regression. And this regression is the only one that's really a permanent change. And it's not something that you can really get through without, in my opinion, making a change, which is teaching independent sleep. So, some of the ways that I like to work on short naps in addition to sleep training is doing something called crib hour. And that is the practice of putting your baby down, of course, awake. They fall asleep on their own through sleep training. And let's say they wake up in 30 minutes. So for example, your baby goes to sleep at 9 a.m. They wake up at 9:30. You don't want them to be up till 10. They're going to stay in their crib until 10 a.m. So 30 minutes in the crib where they have the opportunity to connect that sleep cycle. Ideally, you're not going in for check-ins at that point. If you don't feel comfortable with your baby being in, if they're screaming and you don't feel comfortable with them doing that, that's okay. Try even 10 minutes to start. Just again, giving them that space to try on their own is really valuable. And it might not work the first time, but practice makes perfect, or as perfect as you can get with a baby nap. So practice crib hour. Even if you have a baby that's 2 months old and you want to do crib 45, that's fine too. But let them stay in the crib for a little bit longer after they've woken up if it's a short nap, and let them try. Another thing you can do is really monitoring those wake windows and building up the right amount of sleep pressure for them to take a good nap. If you're putting them down too early and they're under tired, that can actually cause them to wake up after that sleep cycle and just be super content. They've gotten that little nap in, the sleep pressure's lifted, and they don't feel like they need it anymore. So by monitoring your baby's wake windows and what actually they might really need, which might be a little longer than you think because you are probably looking at their sleep EQs, really looking at what's an age appropriate wake window, that will really help to give them the right amount of sleep pressure. If your baby's anything like my first child and you did all of these things and it's still not working, wait until your baby drops to 2 naps. And I hope that doesn't happen for you. It doesn't happen with most people. It did for me. But once a baby is on 2 naps, which could be again around 6 months, they're rolling to their belly to sleep. And we can talk about that as well in a bit. Once they're doing that, that's when that inclination to take a 30-minute nap kind of stops. So they're developmentally able to take longer naps on their own, even if they were really not interested in it originally. So there's an end in sight. It's not a forever thing. There are things we can do to encourage them, but I tell people this all the time. There's only so much we can control as parents. We can give them the right environment, we can give them the right schedule, we can give them the right sleep associations, but then at some point it's up to baby to take a nap or to sleep. And we can't control that part. So we're giving them all the tools and they have to take it the rest of the way. So if at 6 months or, right before you dropped those two naps, you'll get there by then. Just be patient. I know it's hard, but just know that I'm there with you in spirit. Um, moving on to early morning wake up. So that is another very challenging issue that I see with a lot of babies and even older kids. They're usually the most common thing that I see here, and the reason that this happens is because the schedule is just off. So if your child's napping, your baby's napping, they probably just are getting too much day sleep or they don't have enough wake time. So this is a really good opportunity to go back to that chart and see if there's any wiggle room in your schedule. Can you make any adjustments by adding wake time or reducing day sleep to get your baby to sleep longer at night? A very common misconception is that if you put your baby down later, they're going to sleep later. It's actually the opposite. If you put your baby down beyond when is appropriate and they're overtired, they're not going to sleep as well. It's really about balance. And, there's every baby's a little bit different in terms of their sleep needs, but there's really an allotted amount of time in a 24-hour period that is normal for a baby to sleep. So, balancing that day and night sleep is really crucial with early morning wakes. I'll tell you another very common cause of early morning wakes is when we unknowingly give positive reinforcement into the early morning wake. So that could be feeding too early. Let's say your baby wakes up at 5:15 and you offer that feed at 5:45. They're How great is that for them? They woke up early and they got rewarded with a feed. So we don't want to give in and basically start their day earlier just because they're awake earlier. Same as the first nap. This is the one point where I don't go by wake windows with babies. So again, I know this is very nuanced, but this is an important part. Always hold firm to your first nap time. So let's say your desired wake time is 7 a.m. and your baby wakes up at 6:30. You should still hold firm to your first nap time. If it starts at 9, don't bring it up to 8:30 just because your baby woke up 30 minutes earlier. Stick to the 9 a.m. start because otherwise your whole day is cycling earlier. And then you're reinforcing that early wake because ultimately bedtime is going to probably be earlier. And even if you do your regular bedtime, then your baby's probably overtired. So then you have that issue also. So don't give into it by bringing up the first nap. That's really, really helpful. Middle of the night wakes. So there's a lot to this with babies because there's obviously feeding that's required at some point, and then it's distinguishing a hunger wake versus a habit wake. So when I work with my clients, we first establish independent sleep. So even if a baby's feeding overnight, we can still sleep train. The way we do that is we put our babies back down awake after they've had their night feed. So we work together to just establish those independent sleep skills. If after a few nights we still see those middle of the night wake ups where babies are eating, we then look at those feeds and we say, are they taking full feeds? Are they falling asleep right when we start feeding, whether it's nursing or bottle feeding? Are they falling asleep during that? And that's how we can establish, is it true hunger or is it a habit? Because it could just be that they're relying on that sucking or that feeding to soothe themselves back to sleep or back to drowsy. So by establishing that and like really tuning in to see what our baby's needs are, it can be really helpful in determining, should we sleep train through this wake up or should we feed and then put them back down awake and sleep train from there? So I think I forgot to say this in the beginning. One of the very common misconceptions is that sleep training and night weaning are the same thing. I have worked with many babies that require a night feed still, or mom still wants to breastfeed and doesn't want her supply to drop because she's not feeding overnight. That's absolutely fine. We can still sleep train because we're putting our babies back down awake after they've eaten. So they still know how to put themselves to sleep. They're not relying on that feed. If it's not hunger, then it's probably scheduling. And that's again when we look at our chart and we say, where can we make some changes? Is it near a nap transition? Have we maxed out our schedule? Do we need to cap day sleep more? So looking at those is really helpful. Regression. So I know we already talked about the 4 month regression. That's the one that's like the most infamous. There's lots and lots throughout babyhood and toddlerhood, and they're usually linked to some kind of development or advancement, whether it's emotional, physical, verbal. My least favorite is the 18-month sleep regression, which again can happen months outside of that, and it's usually linked to a verbal and vocabulary explosion. The reason I don't like it, or no one likes the regression. The reason I really don't like this one is because it's a toddler, and toddlers are, way more stubborn. They have way more stamina. They can say words and chant for mom or dad, and that becomes really hard. So usually I get questions like, is there a regression at 6 months? Is there a regression at 10 months? And my answer is always maybe, because if your baby went through this advancement, who's to say that that's not related to a regression? Sleep is usually the one of the first things that gets impacted when we see these advancements. The way truly through them is to just go right back to your sleep training method. If your baby knew how to fall asleep independently, they can fall asleep independently through those regressions as well. They only last a few days, maybe a week, so just keep it going. If you know that your schedule feels right, your baby's sleeping well outside of this random new thing, sleep train through it. That's why you built this foundation. Now, here's some of the other places where things get a little bit tricky. Illness. This is where my rule book goes fully out the window for sleep training. If your baby is truly sick, and I mean like not just like a sniffle or a little cough, if they are really uncomfortable, they have a fever or they have a stomach bug, something that really is stopping them from sleeping and really requiring more comfort to sleep, jump in. You don't have to go full force to bringing them into your bed, but go give them an extra snuggle or, hold their hand next to their crib for a little bit. Even if you absolutely need to hold them to fall asleep and sit in their chair, do that. Just take it step by step before you go full to like bringing them into your bed, and do what you need to do to get your baby to sleep because ultimately they need that sleep to get better. And what's really great about a sleep trained baby is they have this foundation to go back to. So as soon as you start to see your baby's symptoms decreasing and they're getting better, you can go right back to normal. And maybe you'll have a night where they're a little extra fussy, but usually I see they are right back to it as long as parents don't kind of delay the process of getting them back into their crib by themselves. Teething. Teething has actually been proven to not heavily impact sleep to the point where we need to intervene significantly. Yes, it makes our babies fussier, but in truth, our babies and children are teething up until after 2 years old. So there could be lots of times where we say, oh, it's teething. I know myself, I always blamed any fussiness, like, oh, he must be teething. So we're not going to be constantly intervening with sleep anytime we think they're fussy and say it's teething. We don't know what's happening underneath there until the tooth comes up. So if your doctor says it's okay to give Tylenol, Motrin, offer that before bed. And that really helps with just the making them more comfortable. And they don't really need much else beyond that. Travel. So there's a lot to this: time zones, flying, different environments. Basically, my rule here is if you need to give your child or your baby a little extra comfort in their new environment, that's okay. It's not, I don't always love sleeping in a new place. It's unfamiliar, and that's okay because, again, they're humans just like us. So if they need a little longer bedtime routine or some extra books or extra snuggles, that's okay. But they should not need to be totally thrown off of their regular routine if they were good sleepers to start with. If you're traveling somewhere that is a totally different time zone and you're there for more than 3 days, just go to your new time zone. And you can kind of meet somewhere in the middle for the first couple days, but try and get there as quickly as you can. And it really does help. Babies are really adaptable, just like we are. I say the same thing with daylight savings time, which I know is coming very soon. Just go to what the time on the clock says the next day. Just like we do as adults, we move to the new time on the clock. There might be a couple days where it feels a little bit weird. Like it might feel earlier or later than it actually is, and it will be the same for your baby. But just like we get back to normal sleep routine, so will they. So just don't make too much of a big deal about it, and it won't be a big deal. Before I move on, there's a question. For naps, my baby takes her best naps in the stroller almost 2 hours. How problematic are naps on the go? This is a great question. So, if you're working on sleep training, I like to have most most naps be in the crib. So, first nap of the day is always the most reliable in the crib. So, practice on that. If crappy naps are happening and you're on nap two and it's not going great, and you're looking at nap three, and if they take a nap in the crib, it's looking like a 5 p.m. bedtime is going to be a reality. That's a great opportunity for a stroller nap because your baby will get good day sleep and you won't have a ridiculously early bedtime, but you've still practiced. Crib naps are really about practice. So it's okay to do naps on the go. Also, you should. You don't want to be stuck in your house all the time, but try practicing it, especially with those early naps in the day. And it's okay to do them if you need on weekends, if you have somewhere you need to be, or if your baby's just taking a crappy nap. Okay. Oh, another question. Our baby is 4 months old and recently has had a sleep regression. If she wakes up in the middle of the night, she really does not come down in the bassinet unless we pick her up. Is sticking it out through the screams the best approach? So, first, I would say if your baby's sleep trained or is falling asleep on their own, then yes, giving them space and following your sleep training method of choice is the best. If your baby wasn't falling asleep on their own initially, then it makes sense that they are not falling back to sleep on their own. So they're requiring that support. So I would say, kind of do what you feel like in the moment. If you feel like you're not ready to sleep train, then you can help comfort your baby back to sleep. When you're ready to sleep train, start with bedtime. It's the easiest time to start the process and then roll right into it through middle of the night. So basically, the rule I live by is every sleep should be based on how they fell asleep. So if they fell asleep on their own, then middle of the night, they should also fall back asleep on their own. If they fell asleep assisted, then it's normal to expect that they want to fall asleep assisted as well. And that's okay to do that until you're ready to sleep train. Oh, another one. Can you use that example with how you would do your check-in method? So 4 month sleep regression, trying to sleep train, how would you do it? Yes. So let's go from the beginning. We do our super solid bedtime routine. Our baby has a feed at the beginning. They're super alert. Bedtime routine is really calm because they've been fed. They're not really hungry, waiting for that feed at the end. So it's really nice, relaxing, and enjoyable for all of you. You put your baby down fully awake in their crib on their back. Babies should always be put down on their back up until 1 year old, even if they're rolling to their belly. So put them down on their back. If they get to their belly, great. If they're laying up, they're sleeping on their back, also great. Put them down on their back, say sweet dreams, I love you, good night, and you leave. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna pull up your monitor and your timer. And you're gonna start your timer for 10 minutes. That's what I do for a 4 month old. So you're looking at what your baby's doing while this timer's going, and you're looking for any attempts at self-soothing. If you see that they are pausing, if they're quieting down, if they're whining instead of crying, for like something that feels like a solid try, it doesn't have to be a second, but a solid try, that's when I stop the timer and set it back to 0. The reason we do that is we don't want to go and interrupt that progress because if they're used to us picking them up, they're going to be more riled up when we ultimately leave. So if they've been crying consistently at really like full volume crying for those 10 minutes, we go in for our check-in. The check-in is 15 seconds max. It's sweet dreams, I love you, mwah, mommy's here, good night, a little rub on their belly, and you leave. And you start the process all over again. So we're doing this until they fall asleep at bedtime. Naps can be a little bit more nuanced because, of course, we can't allow a baby to attempt a nap all day long. So we have a lot of backup plans in place for rescue naps and reattempts. And again, we don't have that much time to go through how the whole method works, but if you need help, I'm here to help you. Um, but yeah, that's how it works for bedtime, and it's really, really, really effective. Another question, is it okay to sleep train during the 4 month sleep regression? Will it be harder during this phase? No, this is a perfect time to do it because, like I said, it is a permanent change to baby sleep cycle. They're not really going to get through it. It doesn't mean that your baby might not be fine, like sleeping through the night at some point after, but it might be harder. And there's no reason to not sleep train during it. I sleep train 4 month olds, probably most common. I would say 3 to 5 months is like the most common time that I hear from parents with babies. I sleep train as young as 10 weeks. I also, like I said, I work with toddlers and older kids, but 3 to 5 months is like the sweet spot that I hear from people. So 4 months is the perfect time to do it. Okay, that is all the questions. So keep them coming. Let's move on. Oh, that's Q&A and wrap up. Okay, great. So anyone who has any questions, please send them through. I'm here. I'm all yours. Oh, you know what? I actually have a note about someone who asked a question about reflux. And sorry if I mispronounce this, laryngomalacia. I think it's called. And I've heard of this from clients before, and I believe it's something with their vocal cords and not being able to cry for an extended period of time. So I have talked to actually multiple sleep consulting colleagues that I know who either have worked with clients that have this condition or have had babies themselves that have had this condition. So as long as your ENT permits sleep training, I am perfectly comfortable with it because I know from other sleep consultants that it has worked beautifully. And similar with reflux, I know it can feel like very daunting saying my baby's uncomfortable when they're laying down. I don't want them to be in pain because of course, we don't know what our baby's crying for. But I will tell you, the majority of the time, they're just simply crying out of protest because they don't know what to do here. So the reason that we do eat, play, sleep, and we have our feeding at the very beginning of the bedtime routine is because we don't want to put our baby down while they're still digesting. So if we feed them at the beginning of the routine, then they're naturally upright in the bath. They've had that all that time to digest, and we're not having to either hold them upright, we're not putting them down too early. So it really does help with us feeling more comfortable knowing that our baby isn't uncomfortable because of the reflux. I've sleep trained many babies with reflux, and honestly, a lot of the times, feeding stuff and reflux actually improve after sleep improves. Okay, a few questions here. Oh, a lot of questions. Okay, here we go. How long does it take usually to sleep train? Do you see baby sleeping through the night by the end of the training? Yes. So I work with clients predominantly for 2 weeks because it's a process. There's some bumps along the way, but usually by the first few nights, we see honestly, after the first night, we see amazing progress. So crying reduces pretty quickly. We might not be sleeping through the night right away, depending on if baby requires feeds. But yeah, if your baby doesn't require feeds or the feeds are habit-based, not hunger, then by the end of 2 weeks, yes, we are sleeping through the night. We're putting ourselves down to sleep. We can do independent naps, even if they're not perfect. We know we have that 45 minutes of solid nap time where we can go jump in the shower, fold some laundry, sit on the couch and watch TV. By the end of 2 weeks, your life is in a very different place. Okay, next question. So the 10-minute timer is straight full volume crying without attempt to self-soothe. That is emotionally and physically safe even at 3 months. Yes, it is. There is no data out there that this is harmful in any way. In fact, it actually, good sleep is proven to benefit both baby and parents. So, yes, of course, I always say ask your pediatrician for approval before I start. I have my clients, acknowledge that before we get started, especially when I'm working with a younger baby. As if your baby is developmentally hitting their milestones, I am 100% on board with starting sleep training around that. Oh, okay, moving on to the next question. How long does the 4-month sleep regression typically last? My baby's waking up every 30 minutes at night for 3 nights in a row. Then we'll sleep through the night. Then the every 30-minute, 3 nights in a row, etc. So, like I said, the 4-month sleep regression is a permanent change to baby's sleep cycle. So, there's no real end in sight because this is how they sleep now. Of course, they could figure out how to sleep without independent sleep skills, but if you're comfortable with the sleep training process, then this is the time to start because, habits just become more cemented as they get older, and your life will be very, very different once you're all sleeping better. Hi, Katie. I know you. If you're sleep training a 4-month-old, can you choose to keep the passy knowing they can eventually get it themselves? Yes, this is a great question, and I know we talked about this weekend too. So if you really want to keep the pacifier, and you feel comfortable popping that passy in at different times of the night, absolutely. It is totally up to you. All of sleep training is up to you. Sleep training is also not for everyone. So if you feel like you want to keep the pacifier and outside of that you want to sleep train, whether it's they fall asleep with the pacifier or they initially don't, and you only use it as troubleshooting during the night or for early mornings, that's absolutely okay. I actually do hold on to a pacifier for troubleshooting if we really need it, like in early mornings or short naps. But yes, this is all very customizable to your comfort level and also what you want for you and your family and your baby. Okay. Next question from Brooke. My son's having trouble connecting his naps. His afternoon nap is usually 1.5, and then an hour later takes a 30-minute nap. Any suggestions on how to connect that? So I don't know how old your baby is, but like I said, my best suggestion for that is practicing crib hour. So that practice, it truly makes a difference. And I see it every day when I work with my clients. It's really about giving your baby a chance to learn to do this on their own, which is really what this whole practice is giving your baby space, giving them confidence to do it by themselves. You will be amazed at what your baby can figure out once we give them a chance. So Brooke, if you want to sidebar me after this, we can talk about your schedule a little bit more in more detail, but and figure out what your schedule might look like and what tweaks we can make. But if you're not currently doing independent sleep or crib hour, that's definitely where I would start. Next question, if we work together to sleep train, what does communication with you look like? Is there a plan we follow and we check in with you? So I work with my clients two ways. One is virtual and one is in person. Virtual is far and away my most popular. I work with my clients for a 2-week service. We start with a 30-minute intake call where we talk about all the nitty-gritty of everything that your family has experienced with sleep, with feeding, up until this point. And then I put together a sleep plan for you based on your family's unique needs, what we talk about, and we start at bedtime and then we work together for 2 weeks. And we mostly communicate over text. So my clients text me throughout bedtime. We navigate the process together. I provide also emotional support because, like I said, can be a very emotionally taxing process. Hearing your baby cry is not easy. Like I said, if it were easy, I wouldn't be doing this. And that's okay. But I've done this with so many families. I've seen the benefits for my clients and my own children. And I'm here to help you and make you feel like, one, you're not alone, but what your baby is doing and experiencing is all super normal. And just that reassurance is in real time is so helpful. So we work together through bedtime, basically any hours of the day that I'm awake. I am here to help you. So usually I'm not awake from the hours 10 to 6. So you probably won't hear from me then, but you never know. And then I check with my clients every morning. We talk about how the night went. We troubleshoot naps together, we work on wake windows, and even those hours overnight, my clients have a full plan in place because we've talked about all this. They have it written out. We talk before bedtime, before their bedtime, and they go to sleep. So they know exactly how to approach middle of the night should that also be an issue. Okay, last question I have here, but we have some more time if you guys want to keep sending. How do you sleep train in an apartment building? Do you ever run into issues with neighbors hearing the screaming? That's a really good question. I have not, and I work with a lot of families in Manhattan, and the city, and no, baby crying is not something that you're going to hear. It's not like loud stomping or even like a dog barking. The white noise helps to subdue it. I've never had an issue where someone's been like severely disturbed outside of the apartment building. But great question. That's the last one I have. If anyone has anything else, I am here and waiting. While we're waiting, in the meantime, if anyone is looking for me, I will tell you first, I am at Concierge Pediatrics in Roslyn the first Friday of every month for office hours. If you want to meet in person, we can do it there. I also, like I said, take most of my appointments virtually. I do offer in-person sleep support. That is 3 overnights in a row. So I help kick off the sleep training process for you, and then we work together remote for 10 days. But mostly I work with my clients virtually because mostly cost effective, but it's also very, very possible and very empowering for parents to do it themselves. If you want to find me on social, I'm at mysleepfriend on Instagram. My website's here. You can email me anytime. Oh, here's another question. Okay, my baby is trying to get to her side. Once she gets to her side, she'll sleep through the night. If she doesn't, she freaks out all night. I can't put her on her side, right? Even though she can't get to her side on her own. I wouldn't suggest it. Keep putting her down on her back, and during the daytime, practice rolling all the time. That is what you're doing. That is your eat, play, sleep. That is your play. You are practicing rolling from back to forward to side. That is what you're doing. And I promise it will come so fast. Like it will probably come tonight just because you're asking this question right now. I swear when you put it out into the universe, it's going to happen for you. So keep putting your baby on their back and she will get to her side. While we're talking about that, once baby gets to their belly, they can safely sleep on their belly. Like I said, still put them down on their back because that is what is safe. But if they can get to their belly on their own, let them be. They might get frustrated at first, but if we go and roll them to their back, it's going to take a lot longer for them to learn to go to their belly. So when they're on their belly, let them stay. It's okay if they cry. They'll figure it out. They'll fall asleep, and then they're going to say to themselves, this is way more comfortable than sleeping on my back. I love this. And then they're going to sleep even better. So once your baby gets to their belly, a lot of issues actually tend to resolve. So let them stay. Okay, moving on. When my baby wakes up from her nap after 30 minutes, do we hold her to continue the nap or keep trying to put her back to sleep? How do I keep a 2-hour nap? So first thing I would say is do crib hours. So let them have some space for that hour to see if they can go back to sleep. If that end of that hour comes and your baby has not fallen asleep, then you can pick her up and see if she wants to contact nap or rock her, throw her in the carrier or stroller to extend that nap a little bit. If she doesn't seem interested, then she probably had what she needed and you can move on with your wake windows. But if your baby does seem willing, there's no downside to helping to extend that nap. You can definitely do that. Oh, Brooke, that's such a nice comment. Thanks for all this very helpful information. I do hope this is helpful for you guys. I know it's so much information and there's so much more to this. So I hope it wasn't too much for you. If you want to talk separately, we absolutely can anytime. Like I said, you could find me at Concierge Pediatrics every month. Also on Instagram, I'm always in my DMs if you have questions. I probably to my not to my benefit. I love giving out free advice, so I'm always here to answer your questions. Oh, a couple more. What are your thoughts on unswaddling? When and how? This is a really good question. My son is 3 months showing signs of rolling, but very, very strong reflex. Worried about the Merlin suit though. So I personally don't love the Merlin, even though it's safe as long as baby's not rolling in the Merlin, it's safe. It's not going to make them too hot. It's as long as they're like they can fit into it, it's fine. It looks hilarious. They look like a giant marshmallow. I don't love it because they don't get access to their hands as easily. And when we're sleep training, we want them to have access to any forms of self-soothing they might find. So whether that's their hands, their fingers, my second rubbed his earlobe and he still does that anytime he's nervous. And when they're in the Merlin, it kind of stops that from happening. So I don't love it for that reason. If you're looking for something that's transitional, I love the zippity zip. They look like a bat, like there's fabric here. And what it does, it subdues the startle reflex. So it's really good for that, but it's safe for them to roll into and they can access their hands even though there's fabric covering it. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Um, when they're showing signs of rolling, definitely take them out of the swaddle for safety reasons. I have no issues with going right to a sleep sack too at that age, as long as your baby doesn't have like an incredibly strong reflex where they're like whacking themselves in the face. If you've seen them be able to find their hands, take them out of this swaddle and go into a sleep sack. If you feel like you want something transitional, then the Zippity is my preferred choice to the Merlin. Oh, someone else said thank you. Oh, another question. I think we have a few more minutes, so I'll get to that. We recently transitioned our 4-month-old, a lot of you with 4-month-olds, so this is great. We recently transitioned our 4-month-old daughter from a swaddle to sleep sack after she showed signs of rolling, but now her arms keep waking her up. She'd like to scratch, rub her face when she's tired. Is there anything we can do? Get the Zippity. You can get it on Amazon. It really does help. And what I think I mentioned, but what I really like about it is it's safe when they're rolling. So even if they get to their belly in that, they can stay in that. So of course you can move to a sleep sack, but you don't have to worry. Like with the Merlin, you have to start watching to see if they can roll while they're in the Merlin. With the Zippity, you don't have to worry about that. So that's a really nice in between if the reflex is still super strong. Okay, that's the last question. Oh, one more. This is the last one from Stephanie. What, if anything, can we do to establish healthy sleep patterns right off the bat from day one? This is where you do the routine. Um, Implement that bedtime routine, implement a nap routine. Even if you're feeding to sleep or rocking to sleep, do that routine first. Read a short little book, sing a little song. I sing my boys, I have a 4-year-old and 2-year-old. I sing them Twinkle Twinkle every night before they go to bed. And they say to me, Twinkle Twinkle, and then they like know it's bedtime next. It's amazing. I swear it's magic. That's actually the one change that I made once I became a sleep consultant with my kids. I obviously everything else was the same. They were already sleep trained, but I added that in and it made their routines even better. So doing those little routines from day one is sustainable and it's also really helpful. Other than that, try not to worry too much in the beginning days. Enjoy those contact naps. Practice safe sleep, of course, but if during the day, enjoy those snuggles. Your baby's going to be sleeping a lot. So don't worry too much about independent sleep from the beginning, unless, of course, you want to practice it. You can totally practice putting them down in their crib awake. If they cry, you could scoop them right back up, but there's no harm in putting them down in their crib because a newborn is going to be sleeping all day anyway. So they're bound to fall asleep very quickly. But if they are unhappy, you could scoop them right back up. We're not going to, do any timers or anything like that with a newborn, but try and take some of that pressure off of yourself. If I were to have another child, I would not be sleep training from day one. I would very much be enjoying those contact naps. So I highly suggest you do too. Okay, I'm really stopping here. And I really so grateful. I hope I didn't sound too fast or crazy with all of this information. I wish I could see some of your faces, but I'm so happy that you guys came. I really hope this was beneficial. If you want to reach out, you can at any time on any of these places. There's a little survey at the end, so please fill that out. It's really helpful for everyone just to see, what takeaways we can do. We're doing this again tomorrow with the age group of 1 to 5. So if any of you have older kids, you can join that and ask questions there too. But please fill that out, and thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Spencer, and thanks everyone for joining. Have a great night.
Bye, good night.